Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be a original tag video. I haven't had an idea for one of these in a long time, and this was inspired by Xander of This Cubed. Xander just like a week ago came out with a really nice fun tag based on the game Hades. And so as I was watching that and thinking about doing that tag, which I do plan to do, it's on my list of ideas, I thought, I wonder if anybody's made a tag for my favorite video games. What if I made a tag for my favorite video games? And so I looked, and there is one tag, Legend of Zelda tag, but it is based on all of the games together and has a question for each game. And what I'm thinking of doing is going in depth and having a whole tag for an individual game, like Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild. And there are no apparent book tags that I could find for any of the Fire Emblem series. I haven't specifically searched for the newer ones that are more popular, like Three Houses, but I've searched for Fire Emblem in general and Sacred Stone specifically. So I decided to make a Fire Emblem Sacred Stones tag, and I'm hoping to make a little series of this where I come up with different tags for the different games. Pre the last 3 or 4 Fire Emblem games, the Fire Emblem fandom, at least that I could find online, was not very big or didn't produce very much. But since, what was the name of that one? The one that had Chrom in it, the fandom has expanded a lot, and Three Houses was very popular. That's the most recent one, and I'm really happy with the new. There's a lot more fan art to be found now, and fan fiction and memes, and I'm really enjoying that. And that has also made it easier to find older art of the older games. And my favorite ever video game, is that true? I think it is. A lot based on nostalgia is Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, because it came out at a key time when I was a kid, and it was my first Fire Emblem game. It did things with story and characters and had quite fun gameplay that I had never seen before, and was my first for a lot of things. And I think that a lot of those story elements stand up today to my current tastes, even though the gameplay is a lot easier, partially because I've played it 1,000 times and know how to do everything, and know some good ways to get around things, and am more patient, because in that game, being patient and willing to grind, which is a very different word in the gaming community than it is in the prom dancing community, then it makes the whole game really easy, and made me feel like I wasn't that bright of a child that I couldn't figure out, because it's a very easy game, and it's not nearly as long as most of the later Fire Emblem games either, or even the earlier ones. It's one of the shortest Fire Emblem games, which is why I was able to complete it when I was 8 years old. So anyway, I was thinking about doing a video for quite a while just about my favorite video games when I was a kid and how they've affected my reading tastes, like I did a while ago for movies that have affected my reading tastes. But I like this idea better because I can go really in depth and then relate it back to questions that other people can answer about books. But basically all of these are going to be me breaking down the characters and some of the story elements from these games and asking you for recommendations for books that have those same things in them. And with that really long intro over with, the last bit of explanation is that this particular game has 6 countries in it that you travel through during the game, and I'm going to do one question for each country and one question for characters from each country, whether it's an individual character or a character relationship that I really like. So the first country is called Renais, which I called Renais when I was a kid because I don't know how to read things, is the country that we start in and that has our main characters in it, and most of the battles that take place in it take place in a forest. So the question for this country is a foresty book. And I have read a fair amount of foresty books. I really like forest-based books, for books that take place in forests. I also like shows that take place in forests, like Robin Hood. That's just very much my thing. A lot of fantasy books involve forests. Sometimes you're trekking through the forest on a quest, like in Lord of the Rings, and sometimes the whole quest is the forest, like in Wild in the Wood, or whatever the name of that book was that I read earlier this year. But the one that I decided to bring up was Fierce Heart by Tara Grace. This one is about an arranged marriage between a human and an elf whose kingdoms are next to each other and they want to make peace, and the human goes to live in the elf's home castle-y place, which is set in a forest with giant trees, and they live in the trees and have tree houses, and it's a lot of fun. There are some bad guys to fight, but I mostly just like the mushy arranged marriage, really sweet characters feels. Two characters from this country are Eirika and Seth, and this is when I talk to you about how much I love bodyguard tropes, especially romances. I'm talking about these two. This originated with them when I was 8. One of the odd things about Fire Emblem, it is a strategy game with turn-based strategy, and you train up your characters and have them fight bad guys, but it's also a shipping game. And what I mean by that is you can sit two characters next to each other and they'll have support. They'll build up this thing where if they sit together enough during turns, they can talk to each other and have relationships with each other. And you can pick which characters you want to have relationships with each other. And different Fire Emblem games, you have more actual options, and other ones are like, no, you can only make it go between these two characters. But yeah, you can choose your romances, and I was always very into the option that put Eirika and Seth together, the princess and her knight. And so my question for this couple is, tell me about a book with the bodyguard trope, or that features both a princess and a knight, because even though I love this trope so much, I actually haven't been able to find that many books that have it in it. There's only a few series, and I'm like, this is my favorite thing ever, because it's the only thing I found with my favorite trope in it. And the one of those that I talk about the most that has this trope is Yona of the Dawn, which is a manga that I love, but it is also present in Rise of Kyoshi. Both of the Kyoshi books have this trope, and I enjoyed a great deal. But it doesn't have to be a romance for this question. I also love platonic relationships between bodyguards and their protectee, their charge, their ward, their charge, probably their charge. Then the second country we encounter is Frelia, and the reason that this is the second country is it is who we run to for help when the bad guys come to get us in Renais. And so because they are the people that our heroes run to, and because of their whole attitude being, yes, we will protect you, you are our friends, we will go with you to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and we will be your shelter in the storm. For this, who is a sidekick that you really enjoy in a book? And I actually also haven't read a lot of books that have a very sidekick sort of person. A lot of the books I read have like a secondary character who is another main character, and the books like try to equalize them and show both of them being like equals, and even if the other one isn't a perspective character, they're like equally as important and like do the decision, half the decision making, and aren't like just going along with whatever the main character wants, which makes sense because it's more of a like healthy relationship dynamic, or more of a common or understandable relationship dynamic. So I had to search really hard for this one, but the one I found was the fairy godmother character from Geekerella. Like, the hero of Geekerella isn't even on the cover. It's the heroine and the fairy godmother who are on the cover of the book, and I think that that accurately represents how important that side character is. But they're very much the support character who helps the main character rather than another main character. And I really like them. They're very cool, and their relationship with the Geekerella girl is awesome. A character from Frelia is Inez. Inez is the prince of that kingdom, and he is kind of childhood friends with the main characters because all of the royals from several of the countries kind of grew up together and know each other. But he's that childhood friend who's like who is kind of always too cool for you, and he's very much a snob. He's quite arrogant. He's a very good sniper, so he like has reason to be arrogant, and he's a good commander, but he's quite grating on a personal level. And so my question is, who is a character who is arrogant or otherwise irritating, but still ultimately lovable? Kind of like Sherlock, specifically from the most recent BBC version. Sometimes upsets people or irritates them or offends them on accident because he doesn't understand social cues because he's autistic coded, but like 3/4 of the time irritates people very much on purpose. But we still all love him, don't we? And the character I found for this is the Merlin character from the main Merlin character from Legendborn, who is whose name I can't remember. I think it starts with an S, but he's very grating to the main character, Bree, I believe, and is generally a butthead for a lot of the story. But he's arrogant in, once again, a kind of a deserved way because he's very powerful and generally has his head on straight more than almost anyone else that he's around. And once we get to know him, I liked him quite a bit. Then Grado is the bad country for this iteration, this particular game in the Fire Emblem series, meaning that they are the aggressors in a nationalistic sort of war between a group of countries. And usually the country that takes on this role in a Fire Emblem story is very militaristic, and Grado is no exception. They, as a people, are very focused on their military, and because they are attacking us and we are defending, most of the characters we meet from their country are part of the military. So what is a book that heavily involves the military? Could be a book like Poppy War, that is set during a war and everybody's part of the military, mostly. That's how I understand that book. I've never actually read it. Or it could be just a book where someone joins the military. It could be a military family in like modern day, or imaginary military. And I picked The Deed of Paxenarian, which I recommend very carefully because it has a lot of triggering things in it, especially the third book. It's like a trilogy that has kind of been smushed together like the Lord of the Rings. Near the end of the third book is a very triggering and very long torture scene. And there are also a lot of other trigger warnings, but I think it's a very good book, and there aren't that many lady knight or lady warrior who works side by side with other military people books, but like very militaristic stories that heavily feature women, not that common. I would recommend this for people who like Tamora Pierce, especially her Protector of the Small series, but would like something more adult and don't mind more adult and upsetting themes. Because Paxenarian, the character, is amazing. She's also probably Arrow Ace. Not every character that doesn't have a romance involved in the story is Arrow Ace, but she seems quite happy and content with it, which leads me to think that. And I always love to recommend books that have that kind of representation. I have a lot of favorite characters from Grado, but one of them is Cormag. One of the ways that you gain players to join your fighting troupe in Fire Emblem is to convert them from the enemy. You go up to talk to them while they're thinking about attacking you and are like, hey, you want to join us? And with various different conversations, and sometimes you have to use certain characters to talk to them who would be able to convince this specific person, which I find a lot of fun. But Cormag is one of those characters, and so for him, what is a book with a redemption arc? Redemption arcs are also one of my very favorite tropes in stories. I love them so much. Like Zuko is the epitome of a well done one, in my opinion. Also Loki. Oh my gosh. I love my sweet child. But anyway, a book with a redemption arc, which I also had a really hard time finding in my have read files on Goodreads. I finally realized that The Good Luck Girls has a redemption arc for one of the 5 main-ish characters, one of the 5 characters who set out on their adventure during the book. One of them was a bit of a bad person at the beginning, did some genuinely bad things like Zuko did. she wasn't just misunderstood, which is a thing that happens in a lot of books. You don't understand why a character takes certain actions at the beginning, but it turns out later that they never actually did anything wrong, and like under those circumstances, of course you would do that thing. But some characters genuinely do things like, yeah, that was wrong. And that's more what I consider a redemption arc rather than a find out they were never really bad arc. And I quite liked the work that went into redeeming her and providing reasons for what she did, but not saying that that means it was okay, but working on character progression so that by the end of the book she would not make those same choices, and also has made up for those choices and has repaired her relationships with the other characters. And now I'm just going to have to remember the rest of the questions because my phone died and none of my chargers can reach where I'm sitting. So I believe the next question was about Carcino, which is a mountainous country. And so what is a book that is set in or heavily features mountains? And I am fairly certain that a fair amount of Race to the Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse takes place in the mountains. They might be metaphysical mountains, but from my memories, I remember imagining a lot of mountains on which various mythological creatures lived, and we were like going around getting help from them. But if you really like mountainous books or like stories about adventuring in the mountains, I have actually 3 recommendations for you. One is Northern Lights, and this is a book by Nora Roberts that takes place in Alaska, and it takes place very close to / in between a couple of mountains, including Denali, which is the biggest mountain in North America, and involves a murder that took place on another mountain that is nearby, and there's lots of talk about climbing mountains and surviving in the cold and stuff like that. And 2 others are from the Alpha and Omega series by Patricia Briggs, because the home base for that series is the mountains of Montana, and both the first one and the 5th one, yes, take place very much in those mountains. Once in the winter and one in the summer, I think, so you get both perspectives. Then a character from that country, I believe his name is Saleh, S-E-L-A-H, and he is a mentor and a sage, which is like a level up from a mage. And he has a particular student at the time of the story who is adorable, and he is kind of like I feel like the adoptive dad of the entire questing troupe. At the point at which he comes into the story, he's the oldest person in the group, and so what book has a mentor character? I do know that it's a favorite trope of mine that I don't see enough of. Okay, this isn't the one from my notes, but I remember there were a couple of mentorish characters from Sasha Masha, which I read for Pride Month, who were kind of queer elders of the local community that Sasha Masha was starting to join during the story. And they were really helpful in Sasha Masha's figuring out how to express their gender and what being queer might mean, and about labels and lack of labels, and how helpful being part of a community is. So I'll pick them. Then what's the next country? The next country is Jahenna, which is a desert country. So what is a book with a desert or a hot book? Which this could be like, is a book set on a volcano, or could be a hot sexy book if you want. I'm going to go with oh gosh, what did I pick? Oh yeah, Stranger is post-apocalyptic, and I remember imagining it as a mostly desert setting with just a few magical, non-actual plant-based trees, and not much like farming or other plant life going on. So I think that was a desert, and I really liked Stranger for the relatively casual representation of queer characters, and also it was just really enjoyable to read. And I only like very specific types of post-apocalyptic fiction. The whole figuring out a new environment and making the most of your resources thing really appeals to me. The character from Jahenna that I want to talk about is Joshua, specifically his relationship with a character from Grado, Natasha, which is a couple that I always stuck together. And the question for that is a book that includes the trope of opposites attract. Because Natasha and Joshua complement each other very well, but are very different. I picked up my phone because I thought maybe holding it would jog a memory of what was on my notes app, and it's not doing that. I gave up and took a break to charge my phone. If I've not mentioned it before, my memory's absolute rubbish. But the answer I came up with for that was The School for Good and Evil, which is all about opposites. Good and evil. There's a school for good and a school for evil, and you get sorted into it like Hogwarts, kind of arbitrary and sometimes very much wrongly, because there's some pretty bad people in one and some pretty good people in the other, and it's not labeled correctly. But the whole concept of the book is about what's really good, what's really evil, and the two main characters are opposites, but which one is evil and which one is good? It's not as clear as you would think. I really love that concept and how a lot of fairy tales and tropes are looked at through a different light in that series, which I haven't been able to continue yet, but I hope to soon. The sixth country is Rausten. The biggest battle in the whole game, really, but specifically in that part, it takes place in ruins, and there are a fair number of ruins in this country. And so my question is, what is a book with ruins, or a book that heavily has to do with echoes of the past? And the book that I picked is The Lost Apothecary, because it is a dual timeline story with one set in the past in the 1700s and one set in current day, and it's all about how they interact with each other and how the modern day character learns about and is influenced by the past character. And there are a lot of books that have dual timelines like this, so you could pick one of those, but also books like Legendborn that have like old prophecies and everything is based on archetypal characters who lived 1,000 years ago would also be a very past-oriented book. A character from that country, we don't get very many characters from that country, mostly because it's the last one, is La Rochelle, who is a priestess character who is also thinks she's a warrior. She's very much not. She's very weak and not really worth training up, unlike Natasha, who becomes a total badass. But she thinks she's a warrior, and she's a warrior for righteousness, and she's a great character. You should really play this game and get to experience her character specifically. But my question for her is, who is a spiritual or religious character? Of any kind, any religion, but I had a really hard time coming up with one for this. I thought it would be a lot easier, but then I was like, you know, that person's not really religious, they just live in a world in which their gods are real, and not just real, but like very much present, and like they're going on a quest with a god. That's not quite the same thing as actually being religious. I have a lot of stories like that. So the one that I came up with was Lila, which has a main character who gets married to a pastor named John Ames. Emotional processing and healing that goes on in that book is really precious to me, although the pastor that I read about the most would be Father Tim from the Mitford series, which is very cute. And another prominent pastor that has a book series is Father Brown, who is a murder mystery solver, which is a very different type of story from Father Tim. And my last question is related to the final battle, which basically all of the Fire Emblem games that I have played thus far, I think, involve all of the countries, which there are usually a fair number of countries, because a lot of Fire Emblem games start out focusing on geopolitical tensions and have that bad or evil country that I talked about being an aggressor, but there's very much a focus on you are not who you are based on what country you're from, and there are good people and bad people from every country, and in order to truly defeat the evil in the world, which is usually either the specific ruler of the bad country or an evil entity that is influencing that ruler, all people from all different walks of life and all different experiences and countries have to come together, and unity is a big factor that helps defeat the evil. And that is very much the case in the final battle of Sacred Stones. There are magical holy weapons from every country, and they are supposed to be wielded by people from those countries, and they are the only things that can damage the big bad guy. So it's like, so a lot of times when I play this game, I have my various representatives from every country riding in, and one takes a slash at the bad guy and runs away, and one takes a slash and runs away, because if they stand there, they'll get killed. So it's very much a hit and run strategy. So my question is, what is a book that involves a Avengers Assemble type hero squad all joining together to accomplish whatever big task is the climax of the story? And this one is a very popular trope, so I actually found quite a few books in my repertoire that fit this. One of them was A Dream So Dark, but I know that they work together to defeat the bad guy in the first book of that series that I can't remember the name of. Once again, my memory gets extra bad when my mental health is bad, so that's also affecting this. But another one that has that trope that I really enjoy is Catfishing on Catnet, which has, in my opinion, the best modern day setting slash only very slightly sci-fi-ish slash fantastical, mostly very realistic story that has an Avengers Assemble time. And so that is my Fire Emblem Sacred Stones book tag. People who I know play video games. I'm fairly certain that Anna, whose channel I usually know the name of, but can't remember right now, will link below. I'm fairly certain they play video games, but I know they play board games, so I will tag them. I will tag Xander as well, since they obviously enjoy video games and tags about video games. Angela plays games. Angela plays video games, I think some, and definitely plays board games. But I also tag anyone else who wants to do this, and if you three don't feel like it, no pressure. I just like to shout out people. If you enjoy video gaming and board gaming and those things mixed with books, you should check out these three's channels because they talk about those things. And you don't have to be into video games, or definitely this specific video game, which is quite old, and I think you can only now play via like buying the internet version and playing it on a console that isn't specifically meant for it, because it was a Game Boy Advance game, to do this tag. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun making this. Being excited about the content I'm making really helps me to actually get it done. Relatedly, don't watch out for an August wrap-up from me because I have read nothing. I have finished nothing except a couple of more Alpha and Omega books, and I feel like you get the gist of what those are about from what I said about the series earlier on. And everything else, I've started a few other books, but I haven't finished it. But I haven't finished any, and I've mostly just been rereading werewolf books. And when I got tired of werewolf books after the third time through the entire 11-12 book series and the second 6-book series, I started rereading my romance series because that is all I have the mental energy for. I've now started reading some other books, but those will come out in a September wrap-up. I would really like to make some fun Halloween-ish October content because I really get into Halloween. It's the time when it's socially acceptable to be really into magic and fantasy, so like it gives me an excuse to be really extra, and I appreciate that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! This is where Sammy Boy is sitting while I film. I've got it zoomed in, and if I get any closer or talk any louder, he's gonna realize I'm filming him. And he won't want to act cute. So I'm doing it like this. He's so sleepy. Such a sleepy boy.